It is June 2nd, and it is now 6 o'clock p.m. And do I hear a motion to enter into executive session to consider employment recommendations for 2020-2021?
Madam Chair, I move that we go into executive session for the purpose of reviewing employment recommendations for the 2020-2021 school year.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. All in favor, please, we can do aye. Please say aye. Anyone opposed? The motion carries, and we are now in executive session. It is June 2nd, 2020, and we are adjourning executive session. We would like to welcome everyone. It's been a great week this week. We've already completed 2 of our graduations. Yesterday, we celebrated with Lexington High School, and this morning, we celebrated with Pelion High School. And tomorrow, we celebrate with River Bluff, Thursday with Gilbert, and Friday, if the weather holds out, with White Knoll. And I just can't tell you enough how wonderful it was. The speeches, the students, it was just been a great time. So anyway, it's a really happy week for Lexington 1. At this time, do I hear a motion to conclude executive session and begin open session?
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn executive session and move into open session.
Okay, I have a motion from Ms. Green. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Oswald. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries, and we are now in open session. I would like to call to order the general session of the June 2nd, 2020 board meeting. This evening, Dr. Powers had a prior commitment at the hospital. He's not able to be with us. I have asked Vice Chair Anne Marie Green to serve as Secretary of Record for tonight. We are meeting tonight in compliance with the governor's orders and CDC COVID-19 recommendations regarding social distancing and other precautions. The auditorium will be thoroughly cleaned and sanitized before and after the board meeting. District staff will also sanitize the microphones before and after staff presentations or individuals speaking during citizens' participation. Board members are taking part in social distancing by maintaining a safe social distance from any other board member. All board members, employees, or other individuals attending the meeting in person are encouraged to wear a cloth face covering. And I just wanted to note, I am wearing my Pelion High School covering tonight. And we also have a beautiful one from Lexington High School so far. And there is limited seating, and once the seating is filled up, attendees will be asked to go to the staff development room, which is what we also call the overflow room, where they can watch the meeting while also observing social distancing guidelines. I would like to inform you that the district is in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. We have notified the media of the date, time, and place of this meeting. The district is taping this meeting for accuracy and preparing the minutes. And if you will allow me at this point, we did have a technology glitch earlier this evening, so we're not using our regular recording devices. And Ms. Hill has advised me to ask everyone, when you speak on the microphone, you have to speak extra loud and really project so that the video camera can pick up our voices until we can get everything set back up again. So when y'all talk, if you can really talk loud. The meeting will be recorded, and a video of the meeting will be posted to the district's YouTube channel, the Lexington One video site, and our own website. At this time, I'd like to call on Dr. Guyton for our invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance. Dr. Guyton?
So uncertainty and unrest have kind of been themes, if you will, since March. And so I always find it comforting to go through or to go back to some of the words of those who have endured similar. So this comes from Lincoln's first inaugural address, March 4th, 1861. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic cords of memory, stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land, will yet swell the chorus of the Union when again touched, as surely they will be by the better angels of our nature. Can we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Dr. Guyton. That was absolutely perfect. At this time, on 5.0, do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Guyton. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Green. Are there any questions or comments before we approve that? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries, and it is unanimous. At this time, we'll go to 6.0, which is reports and action items from executive session. Do I hear a motion to approve 16 certified recommendations for the 2020-2021 school year?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve 16 certified recommendations as made by the administration for the 2020-2021 school year.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oswald. Are there any questions or comments, Board? Okay, I do have one for Mr. Stacy. Where is he? Right back there. Everybody's moving around. How many positions do we have left, and how are you guys coming on that?
26. So that seems like a low number at this point in the year, so we're pretty excited.
Great.
I think the virtual fairs and just the chaos within what we're dealing with right now.
Great. Well, and I'd like to just say into the microphone so that it's really loud. He said we only have 26 positions left to fill, and it's just the first week of June. So that's wonderful. Thank your staff. You guys have done a great job on that. So we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor of those 16 certified recommendations, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries, and it is unanimous. Do I hear a motion to approve 2 administrative recommendations for the 2020-2021 school year?
Madam Chair, I move that we approve 2 administrative positions as recommended by administration for the 2020-2021 school year.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Guyton. Are there any questions or comments, Board? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries, and it is unanimous. Do I hear a motion regarding employee A?
Madam Chair, I move to accept the administration's recommendation to terminate employee A effective immediately in accordance with South Carolina Code sections 59-25-460 and 59-25-470.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Green. Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oswald. Questions or comments, Board? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries, and it is unanimous. Okay. At this time is 7.0, which is citizens' participation. I have not been given any cards tonight. Is there anyone that would like to address the Board that did not fill out a card? If you don't mind, I'm not going to read all those instructions, so we're going to skip a couple of pages. And at this time, we're going to go to 8.0, and just to remind our public, the main purpose of this meeting tonight is to have our second reading of our proposed 2020-2021 general fund operating budget. And for that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Salters and his team from Finance. So, Mr. Salters and Board, let me remind you, this is for information only. We are not voting tonight. This is just for information only.
There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you tonight regarding second reading of our budget. So we'll start tonight again. You're going to see very similar slides this evening that you saw in first reading, with a few changes that I'll point out as we go along. But just as a recap, the general fund is our general operating budget. It's where we pay salaries and the bulk of our operating expenditures for the district. And this budget lays out the revenues and associated expenditures that we expect to spend over the course of this upcoming school year. Of course, the difference with the general fund and capital funds is our capital funds encompass those items that are restricted by law or bond covenants designated for our building projects. some technology, and other renovations. And these capital funds can also be used for purchases such as buses, library books, band instruments, and things like that associated with equipping and building a new facility. So that's an important distinction as we roll through this discussion today. Looking at this 2020-2021 budget, we do anticipate some funding shortfalls in this upcoming fiscal year. We're not clear as to what those are at this point. It's still very early on in the COVID assessment. We are still kind of lagging some in the indicators of revenue received and so forth, since we're just a few months really into the shutdown and now restart of our economy. So I think the Board of Economic Advisors is scheduled to meet next Thursday, and so we'll be actively watching that discussion to see if they have any additional information that we can incorporate into our third reading budget. But as you know, the General Assembly is not scheduled to return until September 15th to talk about budget and discuss the general appropriations bill at that time. And so, they passed a continuing resolution, which basically funds us at the same level this year or this upcoming year as we are this year until they do something based on the work that they do in September. Obviously, we're continuing to monitor the budget process and the economy, and also our local economy, and working with the county folks to see what impacts we may be seeing. What all that means basically is that we will probably need to do a budget amendment at some point in the fall once the legislature comes back in and makes some adjustments to the state budget. This proposed budget doesn't, focus on obviously our quality educational system that we have in place now and all the key supports that we have for students and staff in our system. Currently, there is no salary or step increases. Obviously, due to the continuing resolution that was passed, we're funded at the same level, so none of that is incorporated. I would point out, and should this the state come back and make some recommendations in September, it's very likely that those recommendations will be retroactive, and so, any salary adjustments that would be made would be retroactive through the beginning of the contract year. So teachers and staff would see the full salary increase based on that. The proposed budget is designed to accommodate student growth. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. We do meet our federal and state requirements, and we do have some inflationary costs that we have to deal with that are incorporated into this budget as well. A few priorities, one of which we'll talk about a little bit later this evening. Obviously, it's to open Centerville Elementary School and to restructure Gilbert Elementary and Gilbert Primary Schools in that process. I'm very excited about that opportunity coming up for the students in the Gilbert community this fall. Additionally, we will be relocating Pelion Middle School, and that will occur in the most likely in the January timeframe of 2021. Very pleased to let you know tonight that we had a successful overhead inspection at that facility today, and that's kind of the first major milestone in the building process. So we're very pleased with that. We're also in this budget opening the College Center located at Gilbert High School. It's been fun to see some of the social media related to that. We've seen some students that have been accepted into that program. They're doing a great job promoting that, so we're excited about that opportunity coming up. And then obviously we're preparing for the unknown impact of COVID-19, and that's an ongoing process in the district. I mentioned growth earlier. We are projecting 527 students in growth in this upcoming school year. And we had, I believe it was 847 pre-K students at our 135th day. And so the number that you see there, the 27,034, does not include any pre-K students. So you throw those students in there, and we're approaching the 28,000 student number here in the district this upcoming year. We've had some questions about what, COVID-19, how that will impact our growth. Do we really see that growth occurring? And we went back, and of course it's slightly different times, obviously, or conditions, but we went back to the recession time frame and, the 07, 09 through that time frame. And that was actually one of our highest growth time frames in the district. So, different. It's hard to predict based on the economy what the growth is going to do. You would have thought maybe we would have really slowed down at that time, but we did not. So it's hard to tell what COVID is going to do, but we do anticipate our growth being maintained here in the district.
Mr. Salters, if I
Yes,
I
sir.
may interrupt just a moment. Also, when it comes to our growth numbers, just anecdotally, when you talk to real estate agents, the real estate market is actually doing quite well. There are lots of houses continue to be sold, and we are working on plans because we may have families that are uncomfortable sending their children back to school for whatever reason with the COVID virus, and so we are working on those plans now to help serve all of our students and have those ideas. So we'll be, again, as I've made mention to you on numerous occasions now, I think we'll be talking about those plans hopefully by the end of this month and really outlining those things. But again, to Mr. Salters' point, there still is there's a bit of unknown, I think, with all of this and the exact extent that COVID will have on us. On the other hand, I know parents who are begging to start school again and get their kids right back in it. So I told Dr. Guyton earlier tonight that I went to go vote, and all of a sudden, boom, the person behind the counter looks at my ID, looks at me, looks at my ID, looks at me, and says, "Are we starting school in the fall?" Mm-hmm. And so we get a lot of that. So anyway.
And I think to that point, I actually had a discussion with a couple business leaders today, and a lot of the spec home builders kind of hunkered down a little bit when COVID first started. Now they, of course, continued to build houses that were already under contract, but they had kind of scaled back on their spec homes. Well, they've since now started to release those spec home sites for full production. So I think even within those industries, you're starting to see that ramp up, if you will.
Okay, just taking a quick look at our staffing for next year, proposed staffing. There are no changes on this slide, so I would just point out to you that remember that on the previous slide, we are anticipating a 527 student growth. And what you'll actually notice about that growth, or you might, by looking at this slide, say, well, it looks like those students might be matriculating their way up from elementary into the middle schools and our high schools, and that is true to some degree. We did go back and change our K1 and 2 ratio by adding an additional student in those classrooms to be able to accommodate some of that growth, and that's part of the reason you see the reduction there of 6 FTE. I'd like to just remind you on this slide that the certified licensed professionals for special needs and then those support staff, those salaries primarily are IDEA funded or should be, and which is supposed to be funded at 40% by the federal government, and we're at about 14% in our district. And so those are positions that are not new to the system, but they were funded in IDEA, and as those funds continue to dry up, we have to shift those positions over to our general fund to be able to maintain those services for our students.
Mr. Salters, that is part of a conversation that we've been having ongoing with our legislators, in particular Congressman Joe Wilson, and I would love to get that data to send to his assistant that is always eager to get information from us, and especially something that's kind of real time. I think that would be valuable, and the message that we continue to give him year after year about IDEA funding, that just in 1 year alone, this is the impact that we anticipate. So we can talk afterwards, but I'd love to get like a little statement or a graph or something that we can provide to Emily in his office, because I think that would be very valuable.
Sure, we'll
Because
be
you're
happy.
right, that is it's an obligation that the federal government has to us that they don't meet. They give us the requirements. I mean, we can't not hire that staff,
Right.
but then they don't give us the funding, so it's an unfunded mandate.
Right. Sure, we'd be happy to put something together for you on that. And just taking a look here at some increases in programs and services. I discussed this in first reading. Unemployment compensation, we are a reimbursable provider for unemployment, and so we don't carry an unemployment insurance. We just pay the reimbursements that we are invoiced for, and so we have seen a significant increase in the number of unemployment claims due to COVID-19. And so we are in anticipating that liability coming up next year. We're increasing this budget to offset that. Safety and security, we have an increase here. We had some SROs that were provided by the state this current budget year through some funding at the state level. And the salaries were provided, but the fringe and the equipment costs were not provided for those. And so we're having to cover that portion of those expenditures. We're also currently carrying in this number a 3% salary increase for the SROs in the schools. That's an unknown right now. We're working with the county on their budget, and so that number may go down depending on what they do for their law enforcement officers during their budget. So we're tracking that very closely. So this is kind of a buffer for us right now to make sure we have their salaries covered under our agreement. Employee Assistance Program. This is a program that Mr. Stacy and the HR team has worked on, and there's probably never more of an appropriate time to put something like this in than where we are today. This program will allow access to, among other things, mental health assistance for our employees, and we've seen an uptick in the need for that during this time frame. So we're really excited about being able to offer that to our employees through this opportunity. One of the inflationary costs that we're dealing with is our workers' compensation premiums, and that number is reflected directly of a premium increase. So minimal increases compared to last year. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Salters, the unemployment compensation reimbursements, I think we had a quick conversation about this last month, but those are the folks like substitute teachers that meet a threshold to qualify for that, right? And it's not most of our regular employees. It's the ones that are temp or intermittent that work for us pretty regularly and expect a certain level of income from that. But because of the COVID situation, they're not able to get those hours to get where they would normally earn.
Yes, ma'am.
Right?
That is a portion of the claims that we're seeing is substitute teachers. And there's some discussion back and forth right now about whether we're supposed to cover them during the summer. We never guarantee them employment during the summer, but there's some conversation about us being liable for them during the summer as well. So we're working through those issues, but that is a good portion of that number. But actually, anyone going back to I think it's the third quarter of 2018 could actually, fourth quarter of 2018 could actually file a claim against the district. So
Mr. Salters, that's across the state, though, correct? So
Yes, ma'am.
Other districts are working on that as well?
Yes, ma'am.
Are we all sort of hand in hand trying to figure it out?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, this is not a unique situation in Lexington School District 1.
Okay.
Our reimbursement model is a standard model, and obviously the increases in claims that's a nationwide problem. Some decreases in programs and services. I just want to point out one change here that you'll see. We've really gone back through each department, as I mentioned last time, and each school level account, and tried to address any areas that we could tighten the belt, if you will, and we have in maintenance and repairs. Of course, we have our bond referendum that's active right now, and so we feel like we are doing a lot of positive and exciting renovations and additions in our schools, and so with that, we've trimmed that money back some. Technology supplies, we've trimmed back. Our school allocations, I mentioned this previously, we cut that back, and we actually reduced this number. And what we did is and I'll talk about this in a minute with our fees. We talked about last time. That money is revenue that comes into our schools, and so they're going to be missing obviously that revenue by those fee reductions. And so what we've done is we've gone back in this school allocation and actually increased that disbursement back to them, so by about 50%. So the amount of revenue that they would have lost by their fee collection, less any free and reduced lunch percentage, we took that and cut it in half, and then we're going to allocate that back to the school. And that's something we're looking at. That's really the biggest change in second reading. And that total number is, I believe it's $67,990 across the district that will end up going back out to the schools. And that is only at the schools. We didn't do anything with central services. We did cut supplies, cut travel, obviously with our travel situation in the district and in the country, really. With the virus, we've seen a cut there. The International Exchange Visitor Program, again, I just want to reiterate to you, someone looking at this slide may say, oh my goodness, we cut that whole program. That's not the case. What we did is we, as I mentioned before, the finance team did an extensive analysis of every account in the district and looked at budget to actual spending across the system and identified this account as having a historical balance that was unspent. And so we reduced this account by that amount appropriately. And so the program will still be there and is a very useful program to us, but we'll reduce it by that amount. People transport is a similar reduction, just looking at budget to actual trends over the last 3, 4, 5 years, we were able to reduce that amount as well.
It's kind of funny, just 8 weeks ago or 10 weeks ago, we were worried about those German students coming and whether we should let them come and now it seems like, goodness, that was a million years ago.
For sure.
And so, as I mentioned, Dr. Little, when he came here, really wanted to focus on the cost of our educational program. Started off by reducing elementary supply list costs at for our students in our elementary schools. That was kind of the year one initiative. Last year we focused on, or this current year we focused on middle school fees. And then in this budget we're proposing some additional fee reductions at the elementary school, the $6 kindergarten consumable fee, to eliminate that, and then the $28 grade 1 through 5 fee, we would propose to reduce that fee to $20. And then at the high school level, two fees eliminated: the consumable fee of $5, $5 language arts parallel reading fee, and then reducing the parking fee to $5 from $25. And so, as I mentioned, this is where that $67,990 we would actually send back out to the schools through an allocation to offset the loss in this revenue. And that would really be kind of a year by year look as we see what COVID's going to do and everything. We're looking at some impacts that are really unknown right now. So that's our thought there.
Mr. Salters, I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions tonight.
No problem.
The elementary school fee, is that a global fee? Is that everything? Or will there still be incidentals like Eagles and other things?
There are some other fees associated with elementary. This is just the kind of the generic consumable
grade level
fee.
School fee. Okay.
That's right.
And when we look at these, this typically falls under I think in the CAFRETS, the Pupil Activity Fund. Is
You're
that where
correct.
it's
Yes, sir.
typically housed? When we look at that, are schools typically, are they able to project budget numbers off of this, or are they basically doing cash flow management?
You can do some budget projection just based on, I have 800 students,
Sure.
I have a $5 fee, and I have 50% free and reduced lunch number, because if you're free, you don't pay the fee. Reduced pays a reduced rate. And then there's generally they're pretty aware of their collection percentage, and so you can do some some projection of that fee.
Gotcha. And are they within the activity fund itself? Are there certain thresholds that are maintained or expected, or is it again just kind of sort of the needs are what the needs are and cash flow management kind of thing?
When you say thresholds,
Like, if they collect $100,000, they're at the end of the year there needs to be maintain a minimum balance of 20,000 or whatever it may be.
no, so there's not a minimum balance requirement or anything like that. I'll tell you that what we're trying to do is really tighten the focus on those fees, so that if I collect a $5 language arts parallel reading fee, I spend $5 on language arts parallel reading, or $4.75, or some number close to that. What I don't want to see is me collecting a $5 language arts parallel reading fee, not spending it this year, collect it again next year, not spend it, collect it again the next year, and then spend a bunch of money on year 3 student, right? So the idea would be money in is used on the
Money
expenditure listed, and then money goes out. So you don't see a lot of, in those activities, you shouldn't see a lot of money collected, revenue collected in those accounts over time. That's really what we're trying to work towards. There's one exception to that, and that is the technology fee. And that fee is an optional insurance program. And so we self-insure our technology devices.
Okay, so that is self-insured.
And so you'll see potentially a large number at a given school and maybe a negative number at another school. But what you're looking at really is the overall district pool, because it's a self-insurance model.
Sure.
And so just like in our own car insurance, for example, I pay in, and knock on wood, I hopefully don't have an accident, but when my neighbor has an accident, they're using the money that I paid to fix their car. Same concept with the technology fee. And when we first rolled out devices, however long ago, 10, 15 years ago, we looked at various models around the country, and that model seemed to be the most efficient and cost-effective for parents. And it's really held true and worked in our system. So that one is kind of an exception. You may see some balances fluctuate and grow over time.
Yeah, I would imagine year 10 would look much better than year 1.
You hope.
Yeah.
But again, we analyze that because it's not intended to be just a money pit, if you will.
Sure.
So if I don't need to collect $50 a year because my device cost is going down, just like your car insurance company, I hope, has given you a reduction over the last, mine finally did, over the last few weeks for COVID. If we don't need to collect $50, then we're not going to collect $50. We want that model to work, because you're not just collecting money just to sit on it. So.
I'm sorry, I've got one more question.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is really in the weeds, and it may be something that you don't know the answer to. And I can't remember if it was the budget discussion last year or 2 years ago. And I mentioned, I think Mr. Butler was not sure. So, like, say at the high school level, a student changes their schedule, but their fees have already been paid. I know I experienced this with one of my own children, and the only mechanism the school had for a refund was a lunch money credit. What you're talking about sounds like the fees are actually in a fee fund to be used for certain purposes, and it seems like that would not cross over into lunch money. And we never did get it. I think it was $5, and so I'm not sure what happened to it. But is there a standard mechanism across all of our schools for fee refunds or reimbursements?
Yes.
Or credits?
I'm watching David shake his head, and there is. And we're actually, because of the circumstances we're in now, we're actually doing some refunds. And Mr. Branham shaking his head as well. We're doing a lot of refunds now that we wouldn't normally have done. So we do have a mechanism to do that. And we have a certain threshold, in years past, of course, when students were there, if it was under a certain amount, we would actually, could give cash to the student with a note home or whatever. More often than not, it was a check distributed to the parent. But there is a mechanism in place to do that.
Okay, because I'm not sure that it ever got resolved before, and I was still murky on that. And that seemed to be commingling two completely separate things,
Yes.
which was kind of strange to me. That was the only resolution that was offered at the time.
Maybe we can talk more about that offline.
That's fine.
I'd be curious to know
I just
more
wasn't
about
sure if it was something that each school decided how to administer that, or if there was an actual procedure. So that
Right.
makes me feel better.
Okay. All right. One additional change in the second reading, we have received now our paid lunch equity guidance from the United States Department of Agriculture. Usually comes in around this time of year, and it came in a week or so ago. The guidance that the USDA has sent us has resulted in a meal price increase of 10 cents per day for 2020, 2021. This doesn't have any direct impact on the general fund per se, but it is, part of the budget process to make that meal increase. So breakfast fee will go up to $1.60, and then lunch fee will go up to $3.10. And again, that's, basically directly from the USDA. So that's just as really information.
Mr. Salters, it's not really in line with the budget, but walk us through what we're doing with the lunch and breakfast program now with the kids. Is that still ongoing? Have we terminated? I haven't seen anything about it.
I'm happy to tell you that we are still providing those
That's what I
services for our students. It's a tremendous partnership with our transportation department. Our bus drivers have been unbelievable, and our food service staff, and also the volunteers. Many of you have volunteered, and we greatly appreciate that. Initially, we were basically doing an everyday thing. We transitioned to a 2-day-a-week distribution where we're distributing the same, week-long worth of meals, and then we do that during 2 days of distribution. We're carrying that through the end of June, and then we just actually had a meeting. I had a meeting today about July and possibly even into August, but right now we're approved through July. I think it's 29th for a 5 days worth of meals, and we would distribute on Wednesday in July. So you would distribute those meals over at once over that period of time. But so we'll carry it through the summer, and that's district wide. So we're very excited to be able to offer that opportunity for our students. Our bus drivers and our food service folks have really, really worked hard. And going down to 2 days a week was that we were able to give them somewhat of a break, and then it'll help them going forward for a day. But we are excited to be able to continue that. In the past, we've done some summer feeding programs, but they've been isolated in certain geographic areas. And this way, we will be able to feed any child under 18 years old, or 18 and under. So we're pleased with that. So that will continue. Just taking a quick look at our projected revenues. Really, the only thing that we're showing different here on these slides is we are that $67,990. We pulled from the operational balance, and so that's going to be reflective in that category. And again, these numbers are projections, and we'll be monitoring these very closely. And you might say, well, Mr. Salters, you said that the state was going to have the same allocation of funding as they did this current year, but you're showing a difference there, an increase on one line and then a slight decrease on another line. And what we did is we actually trued up the actual money received versus the budget. So on that left-hand column, you're actually looking at a budget that we anticipated the state would give us, and in that middle column, we're actually using the numbers we received this year. So that's why that number's slightly higher, which is a good thing. But you do notice there a pretty big difference in the overall number, $7.9 million, a decrease in the projected revenue. Salaries and related costs, this is our operating expenditures on the kind of the other side of the equation. I mentioned this last time, the number there, we aren't cutting salaries. We're not cutting anybody's salary through doing this, but what we're looking at is, as I mentioned before, we're looking at I just call it our fill rate, our occupancy rate, if you will, from our payroll, and you factor that in with also our base payroll this year starting is a little bit smaller than FY20, and there are many factors in that, but one of the factors would be you have more experienced employees who retire, and those salaries go with them, and a less experienced person typically takes over that role, and the smaller salary comes in. But that fill rate, we looked at that historically. The highest fill rate we've had for about the past 5 years was 98%. And that just, as I said before, that just factors in. You have somebody resign from a position. That position is a 230-day or year-round position. They resign. There may be anywhere from 15 to 30 days to 2 months even when that person or that position's unoccupied, but we still have that salary budgeted. And so by budgeting at a 98% rate, that allows us to capture some of that percentage. It's a pretty aggressive approach, but we feel pretty comfortable with the 98%. I'm not sure I would be real excited about going any further than that, but at least until we vet this model for a few years. So programs and services, it's a very unique situation. I don't know that I recall, I'm sure we have in the past, but I don't recall in my 20-something years of being here, we've actually reduced our programs and services from year to year and still had the growth that we've had. But we're doing that to the tune of $831,820. So again, the total budget is going down. And as I say that, I just remind you that in the fall, it's possible that we may do a budget amendment based on additional funding from the state, and that number will go up. So kind of just say stay tuned on that. We are obviously in the people business. Students are our and learning are our biggest products, and and services, and our teachers are our greatest asset, and that's where our money is spent. 87.7% of our funds go into that resource. So that's just a breakdown of that. Act 388, I haven't spent a lot of time talking about that. We go through a calculation every year to look at the allowable millage increase. And this is really based on the Consumer Price Index model. And based on that information, we could potentially levy millage that would generate $3.6 million, about 12.82 mills. And you see that we are not recommending doing that. We actually could levy more than that because there's a look-back provision in Act 388. So we could go back several years because we haven't levied millage the past couple of years for operations. But we're not recommending doing that at this time. We feel it's, our businesses have had a hard enough hit with COVID-19. And so we feel like we're really trying to hold tight and not do that. So just quickly in summary, revenue projections from the state, as I mentioned, remain where they were this year. Local revenues declined a little bit due to some economic trends, and then the actual collections that we've made. We're really trying to align those projections to what's actually being collected. And then, as I mentioned before, we are meeting our federal and state requirements, even though we're not getting all the funding from the federal level to do that. We are meeting those required inflationary numbers. Opening our schools related to the building program. I just want to mention again, it does not include a millage increase for operations, and we will likely have some kind of budget amendment in the fall after the General Assembly meets again. So with that, Dr. Little, you want to?
Well, I just want to
jump in
say,
and add a
I
few
think the
things?
one thing about this budget that is a very, it's a strength, and I certainly appreciate the finance team being here tonight, is that I think it puts us in a good spot with the uncertainty of COVID-19, that if there is some, it's a planning for the worst but hoping for the best. And so I think it's a really tight budget. I mean, there's certainly not, it's a tight budget, but I think it prepares us for some eventual shortfalls that we may be looking at. So thank you all very much for your creativity, and it's not very often you hear finance people talk about creativity, but I appreciate it. And I thank you for your commitment to our students, because it's tough sometimes to look at numbers and then recognize that number represents a person, or it represents, we're changing lives, and it's more than just a line item in a budget. So thank you all for looking at that and for your leadership. And I'd like to personally thank Mr. Salters. This is his first budget where he has led from beginning to end. And I think you see the result of his continued leadership, and he and I working together very closely to establish a vision. And even in these tough times, you make a budget that can work. So very nicely done, sir.
I just have some comments and some
Sure.
questions. Somebody asked about some fees, and thank you, Kyle, for digging into that. I know earlier in February, a concerned citizen emailed the board, and she brought to our attention how the parking fees were being spent. And I'm pretty sure that's why the parking fee was decreased from $25 to $5. In her email, she asked that the board get the details of each fee account in order to make an informed decision before voting on the budget. Given the fact that she found out the parking fees were used for florists, restaurants, rental companies, clothing, sports apparel, just to name a few, I wholeheartedly agree when she says that we have a responsibility to understand and verify the information given to us. And she said anything short of that is lack of respect for stakeholders' money. Schedule F3 in the CAFR actually outlines each school, their beginning balance of their pupil activity funds and the ending balance. And just to name a couple off, one of them starts out at $268,000 beginning balance and ends with $254,000. One's at $27,000 beginning and $19,000 ending. So those funds aren't being spent every year, and this is something we really need to look hard at. Like she said, she just did a FOIA, got all the receipts for parking fees, and so as a board, we need to go back through each of these, even the insurance fee, because I know in some of these accounts, there's a lot of money, I mean, hundreds of thousands sitting there, not just technical insurance, but altogether in the account. A couple of other things. I know Mr. Salters, I got a couple questions for you. So in 2019-20, our priorities included salary increases, step increases, maintaining the current class ratios, supplemental student support. And in 2018-19, it included relieving stress on teachers with pool positions, lowering or at least maintaining the current class ratios. According to board policy, it's our job to establish budget priorities through advanced planning and being provided timely and appropriate information. Not only do we not establish priorities, but when I asked for a copy of the budget prior to first reading, I wasn't allowed to have a copy. I think one of our priorities should be lowering or maintaining class size, as this aligns with preparing for COVID-19, the impact and unknowns. Also, but instead, I mean, we are actually increasing class sizes in the elementary schools. Also, increasing sub-pay. Now is the time that we need to be competitive because we are going to have more teacher absences because of sick leave. As far as step increases, I've gotten an earful. I've been asked, are we not worth it? When our insurance premiums increase this year, we'll be actually making less than we were last year. And for Mr. Salters, last year we had detailed information. I'm on slide 6, by the way, about Beechwood, Pleasant Hill, Lexington Middle, when we did all that rezoning. Can we get that information for Centerville and GES?
You want to see the FTE changes?
Yes.
Yeah, we'd be glad to do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and last year in September, I got a detailed budget for central services. Can I get one of those this year before third reading?
I'll see what we can do.
Okay. There is a line item in that detailed budget for $2.5 million, and it's for an annual leave bonus. Do you know what that's for?
Yes, ma'am, I'm familiar with that.
What is that?
You have a policy that is annual leave buyout. That is a board policy. And so at the end of the year, there are two ways that comes into play. The first way is if you have an employee, when you become an employee, you elect to accrue either 90 days or 135 days. And if you stop, when you get that many days accrued, the next year, let's say, you, like myself, it's 16 days a year, the district per policy buys those back from you so that you stay at that 135 or 90. They buy it back at substitute pay. So that's one way that money's used. The other way is that at separation, your policy allows for a portion of those days to be purchased back from the employee.
Okay, thank you. Slide 8, and these will change as I go up because we added an additional slide, but the proposed staffing changes. I know in here it says school, but does this also include central services staff?
Which line item are you looking at?
Well, any of them. I'm just wondering, do all of these numbers, do these include central services?
Yeah, I mean, this is representative of the whole district.
Okay. Because it just didn't say that. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure. So the next slide. Now, I noticed tonight when we were going over safety and security, you did not mention additional SROs, but in first reading you did. So are we adding SROs, or is that just the?
I think I was referencing the 4 that were provided by the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if that was, if those were additional SROs, or if that you were still talking about. The
Yes,
equipment.
those are additional SROs that are provided by the state. But,
Okay.
but only the salary is paid by the state.
Okay. Where are those going?
Those are targeting in our elementary schools, and we don't have an actual location yet. because we're working with the Sheriff's Department to actually see if those positions can be filled. The SRO positions, they've had a fair amount of turnover this year, and some of our existing SROs have been promoted and moved on to other jobs, and so there's a shortage of those certified SROs available right now. So once we know how many are available and filled, we will map that out.
I was at
and we
a-
can share that with
I
you.
think it was when Sheriff Coon came to read at one of our schools, and we were talking about SROs, and he said that is his hardest position to fill.
It is.
It takes a very special person.
Elementary SRO is
Right.
the hardest.
And he said it is so hard to fill those positions, and he was telling us how they really struggle.
Okay, and at the top of that slide, you said that the unemployment compensation, this is a potential area to offset through the CARES Act. What other areas are you looking at that might be offset through the CARES Act?
We have several areas so far that have come up. One is cleaning supplies that we have recently purchased. We have the electrostatic cleaners. I don't know if you guys have seen these, where you basically walk into a room and you spray. It's almost like a blower, if you will, but it sprays out the cleaning material, and it puts an electric charge in it so that it will actually adhere to surfaces. We've purchased those cleaners for each school to make it a more efficient process. Some other cleaning supplies and things like that we've purchased. We're looking at some, upfit type items for our front counters, plexiglass shields and different things like that. A lot of our personal protective equipment, things like that are, hot items, if you will, for the CARES Act. We just had a webinar today from the state that walked through the process of claiming funds and setting up a budget. And so we're actually, in fact, I've got to have a conversation with Dr. Talley. We're going to have, a collaboration and try to identify some other budget items that could potentially be earmarked for that, but that we haven't completed that process yet. We have to claim that money, I think, by July 5th.
Okay, thank you.
Don't hold me to that date, but I think that's right. It's first part of July.
Okay, yeah, you answered my question. Okay, the next slide. In 1920, the New York City Leadership Academy was decreased by $122,000 and put on hold for a year. Do we have any money allocated in this budget for the NYCLA?
There's some consultative services, I think, in there, because we're doing we're doing another cohort, and that cohort will also involve a virtual component. So I think there's some consultative services in that.
Okay, thank you. And slide 12, which would now be slide 13. Okay, so according to the CAFR,
I'm sorry, can you give me the title of the slide?
oh, yeah, projected revenue changes.
thank you.
And I'm not even like, most of this I got out of the CAFR, so I'm
Okay.
not even sure you'll need
All right.
to be looking at that. Last year, we spent 18.1 million less than we budgeted, according to the CAFR. In previous years, 2018, it was 12.5 million. It was 9 million in 2017. In addition, every year since 2013, our state revenues have exceeded our budget by millions. And the current projections for this budget for state revenues remain level, which means we are already ahead of where we were last year at this time, because that's the amount our state revenue exceeded our budget for last year. At the end of every year, we have transferred millions to the capital projects. Just last year alone, it was 8.5 million. The year before that was 8.5 million. I mean, I have a spreadsheet here if anybody's interested, going back to 2013. In the CAFR, it says capital projects are one of the main areas of focus in financial planning. However, this is a piece of the puzzle that we as a board are missing. And first of all, we need a budget to actual column included in the proposed budgets. And Mr. Salters, this isn't so much for you as it is just, we just let the board know that if we had a budget to actual column, I mean, we could do this math ourselves and figure this out every year. And secondly, we need a copy of the capital projects budget. And we see, if you look in the CAFR, it tells you that, let's see here. Capital projects are one of the main areas of focus in financial planning. So if we are taking out, 8.5 million, 6 million, 3.5 million, and sticking it in the capital projects every year, then we obviously need to know where that's going. And to my knowledge, I've never seen a capital projects budget. Is that something we get a copy of, Mr. Salters?
I'll be happy to show you every capital expenditure we have, sure.
Okay. Do we have some type of schedule for like the parking lot roofs, HVAC, vehicle replacement?
We have a facility study that was done in 2017 that we passed a bond referendum for in 2018. That is the primary budget related to the capital projects, and that's the primary work that's ongoing right now. We do have documents that we maintain in our maintenance department of when our roofs need to be replaced, when our HVAC units need to be replaced, and things like that, of course. But the primary guiding budget that we work from is the 2018 facility study.
Okay,
That was-
before that, what did you use? Did y'all just have,
Before that, we used
Yeah.
the 2008 referendum facility study.
okay. And so would you know just by what you have, when the HVAC needs to be replaced at any given school?
Sure.
Okay. Because I know we had a former board member that was asking about uniforms for, I think it was cheerleading or something. Is that one of the things in the capital budget? Will we have a line item, like specifically for uniforms, not just cheerleading, but band?
You typically would not see like a cheerleading uniform in the capital budget, but it depends on the situation. I mean, you can, when you're opening a school and they have a cheerleading team. We just opened Beechwood. They had a football team. We bought helmets and uniforms out of the capital budget for Beechwood to equip the school.
Okay. And so based on that schedule, that's a good example. When would Beechwood be due uniforms and helmets and all that again?
They develop their own schedule. Like, for example, our high schools, we typically don't replace, that doesn't fall on the capital budget for us, or the general fund budget for that matter, to replace those uniforms typically. Usually they do that through their athletic allocation. The athletic director and the principal set aside money each year through the athletic allocation and through, the booster club. And they have their own schedules of when those uniforms need to be replaced, and it varies by sport. Obviously, some sports wear and tear uniforms more than others.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I got a couple more. What kind of cost savings have we seen with utilities, buses, water consumption, et cetera, since March?
We're still doing an analysis of our utility bills because they lag behind, but we have seen some reduction. It's a little bit of a misnomer to say that because we're not in buildings, we should see major reductions in some of these things. Obviously, we're not burning all the lights that we normally would burn, but if we shut off HVAC systems, we're going to have a mess. I'll just put it that way. And so we have to keep the buildings climatized, and so we've seen some desirable temperatures lately. So, and you probably noticed this at home, your bills are probably not as high as they could be during the summertime. And so that, those things shift and flow, but we really wouldn't see that big of a difference in some of that, some of those expenditures, other than light bills and things like that.
Okay.
I mean, for lighting, you know what I'm saying? And we still have to
Right.
run for power.
Right. So you don't have just like an estimate of,
No,
No.
I don't have that in front of me.
okay. Let's see here. What amount, if you know this as well, if not, you can get back to me later, is projected to be transferred to capital projects this year?
This current, in 1920,
Right.
the current year we're
yeah.
in, so at the end of this year,
Right, end of, yeah,
we don't have an amount projected to be transferred.
okay. When do y'all know that? Like after,
When we close out the year, we see how much money is left at the end of the year, and make that determination then. So that's usually in the August timeframe.
Okay,
And if I can kind of step back a second and just let you know that one of the initiatives that Dr. Little charged me with when I walked into this position was making sure that we put money where it needed to be. And so what I mean by that is going through and looking at budget to actual, finding sources of money that make up that $8 million or that $10 million or that $18 million, over a period of time, and trying to figure out how we can close that gap. So, as a finance person, when you have a $300 million budget, it's not like a home budget. It's $300 million with thousands of accounts, and you have, $10 left in thousands of accounts. Just $10. You roll that up, you got a big chunk of money at the end of the day, right? And so as you look at that, obviously you want to try to minimize that gap and be as efficient as you can be. But at the same time, you have to mitigate risk. And so it's unrealistic to think that you're going to have a $300 million budget and land on $0 at the end of the year, because everything is not going to be spent exactly as it was budgeted, to the dollar, right? Some things are going to be cheaper than others, and that's just the way it is. But you also don't want to make sacrifices on initiatives and things that could be good for students and have a bunch of money left at the end of a given year. And so some of the things that we've done is gone back through and combed every account, all thousands of those accounts, looking at budget to actuals. Additionally, looking at our fill rate on our payroll, because payroll, frankly, is our biggest number. I mean, $250+ million, whatever. I mean, it's a big number, right? And so when you do that and you have just 1% of that left over, that's what, $2.5 million, okay? And so to get that number right is very important. And that's an area where you can see some fluctuation. So that's why we are looking at the fill rate and some other initiatives that we're trying to do. So that's been my charge from Dr. Little is, hey, let's figure this thing out and let's try to get that number as tight as we can. But you need to understand that number's never going to be, I hope, zero. Or there may be times where it's it may be negative. I mean, we're showing on this slide right here that we're going to transfer $3.788 million of fund balance, take it out of our savings account, and make this budget balance. That's what that means. So when you say, I want step increases, I want, sub pay increases, I do too. I mean, we talked about SLT, we talked about sub pay. Our principals have talked about sub pay. We need substitutes. And we want to do that. But right now in this budget, we're taking $3.7 million, $3.8 million, you might as well say, out of our savings account to make this budget balance. And if you do that continually, just like in your home budget, you're going to go broke. But what you don't want to do is say, I'm going to take $3.8 million out of my budget and then turn around and not do that and have a big savings left, right? Mm-hmm. And that's our goal, is to close that gap. And that was a charge from Dr. Little. That was the first thing he said to me. You got to figure this thing out. And so that's what our team is working on doing.
right. And I mean, I told you during first reading that, I think this is great. This should have been done, a long time ago. And I understand, taking money out of the fund balance. But also at the same time, we don't know, like I said, every year, according to that little chart I made, we have transferred millions, out of
Sure.
general fund into capital, and also left some of the fund balance. So, that number could possibly, greatly decrease, and we not even have to use our fund balance.
That is true.
Yes. Okay. But thank you. Like I told you in first reading, I just want to reiterate that. Like, I really appreciate what's been done with the budget this year.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yes. Good job. It could have been done, a long time ago, but at least it's happening. We're getting there. Let me see. Okay, so talking about those funds that we transfer into the capital projects, can that be transferred back into the operating fund?
It depends.
Okay, that's a good answer. Let's see here. Okay, so you mentioned a salary increase. I'm sure you already know this, that y'all ran these numbers. What would a step increase look like across the board for all employees? That's funny.
Do you remember that number, Deborah? Was it? Let me not quote a number. It was. I think it was like it's $3 or $4 million.
Okay. And
I'm happy to follow up with an exact number, but no, ma'am, that would be everyone. We have it broken down by each classification, so I can get you a specific number.
okay.
Mr. Salters, if I recall correctly, each 1% step increase for certified is about $1 million. Is that right?
It's close to that,
Okay.
but I'll get you an exact number.
Okay, that's fine. And then I have a question about the furniture, but I will save that until, I'll just catch up with you after the board meeting for that. So I think that does it for me.
Okay.
Thank you.
Board, are there any other questions or comments from Mr. Salters and the finance team? Okay, thank you, Mr. Salters.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks, guys. We're glad y'all are here. At this time, we're going to go to 9.0, which is the superintendent's update. And board, this is for information only, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Little. Dr. Little?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So very quickly on, I do want to provide a quick superintendent update. One of the things that we are working on right now as we continue to plan for reentry is we are developing our athletic reentry plans as well. Several weeks ago, we began to anticipate the development of guidelines for the South Carolina High School League, and Coach Bennett and Mr. Caldwell and his team and athletic directors began discussing what that might look like. And as you'll note, I believe it was Friday, Mr. Caldwell, those guidelines were released and became official for the first time. And they are, the guidelines really represent a phase 1 of a 3 approach. They've not given us guidelines on phase 2 and phase 3 yet, but they're guidelines on phase 1. And so our athletic directors and whatnot are looking at that at the moment. Again, I want to just make sure that we're certainly eager to reinstate athletic opportunities for our students, but that our first priority will continue to be safety. And that safety is going to be number 1 above everything else. We have a tentative date of Monday, June 15th, that we will begin the reentry process. But I want to reiterate, that's a tentative date. We're working on the plan, and we're trying to do a lot of stuff at once this summer. Sometimes it does feel like we're running in quicksand quite a bit, but our tentative date for that is June 15th. But again, we're not going to begin anything until we feel that the plan is comfortable and for our students, and that we're going to have our students are going to be safe. So I wanted to just note on that for a moment. And there's a number of things we need to talk about tonight. Or actually not a number of things, but 2 things, but both of them I think are very important. And so tonight I'd like to introduce Mr. Heath Branham, the principal of Centerville Elementary School, and he's going to provide you with some information regarding the rebranding of Centerville Elementary School and what that's going to look like for the fall. So, Mr. Branham.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm happy to be here this evening to talk about developments at Centerville Elementary, our newest elementary school. If you've driven down Highway 1 towards Gilbert, you've seen a lot of progress, and so we're really excited about that. Of course, this is what the artist rendering is, and I know you've seen this before, but it's really shaping up to look just like this, which is pretty exciting. You'll also see in the prototype design, this is the 4th in the development, and you can see where the architect has designed an amazing terrazzo design in the center hub where we'll congregate, have collaboration and other things. And so our logo and mascot that you'll see in just a minute, we've pulled from these colors, so there's a unified theme at Centerville Elementary. I will tell you before we got into the whole mascot logo theme conversations. We sent out surveys to all of the Gilbert primary and Gilbert elementary families and asked for them to complete, and they did, and we received over 300 responses. Many of those responses were similar. And the top three came down to coyotes, cyclones, and aviators. And from there, I spent some time at Gilbert Primary School early January, late January, talking to student groups and giving them ideas and showing them different things of what the coyotes could look like, different things for aviators, different things for cyclones. And I got some really interesting feedback. If you ask kids, they'll tell you. One little girl at Gilbert Primary started crying and said, "We can't do coyotes, they kill my papa's chickens." Literally. And I wasn't prepared for that, even though I know that happens. There were some kids like, "Yeah, that's cool, that's cool." But most of them there settled on aviators. They really like the concept of flight and journeys and flying. And when I did the same at Gilbert Elementary and had focus groups with students, they gave me their opinions as well. But at the end of the day, the consensus was aviators. And so our new mascot is the Centerville Elementary Aviators. And we're pretty excited about that. So I'm going to unveil to you, the first persons to see it tonight, the new primary logo with Centerville Elementary. And you can see we've had a lot of different iterations, and we've gotten feedback on these iterations from our leadership team, from students, et cetera. And so you'll see the second logo design, Centerville Elementary Aviators, that we'll use on pins when kids meet their goals. They're going to get like the flight pins that you get on an airline. So we've got a lot of things planned, including what some of the streets will be called inside of the school, the main terminal, the control tower. So we're really trying to tie it into real world technology, engineering, science, math. Our slogan is "Start here, go anywhere." And we believe that this is possible because of the adults in the building and because of the community and the staff that wrap around to make that happen. Just quickly, we're located on Augusta Highway. We'll open with approximately 700 students. We are designated as a Title I school. We just officially learned that recently, and we're very happy to hear that because that means additional funding for opportunities for kids. We will have pre-K through grade 5 and about 100 staff members, inclusive of certified and support staff. Our mission, aligned with the district, is to have that caring community within our school and beyond, where all learners communicate, collaborate, create, and think critically. And our vision, and you'll see in a minute how we're going to bring this vision to life, is to empower each child to design the future. 3 belief statements for Centerville. Number 1, and this was part of our hiring process, and we did transfers. We also had to hire some folks, but they had to pick which statement they felt most closely aligned with their own philosophy for teaching and learning. And number 1 is very important to us, both now at Gilbert Elementary and will be at Centerville. We believe that all students can learn, and we are committed to doing whatever it takes to ensure all students learn at high levels. The second one, we believe that creating the right conditions, engaging experiences, and high levels of learning are within our control. And number 3, we believe every child is curious, passionate, and has dreams and aspirations that can take them anywhere. In our school, we aspire to be a high-performing professional learning community where collaboration permeates everything we do between adults and children, children and children. Our focus is on learning and learning outcomes, and we're always looking at our results. And those results aren't always just state achievement data, but it could be school culture data, school climate, how parents are perceiving us, how the student experience is. All of those results with collaboration and learning are what make us Centerville Elementary. But of course, and I heard this mentioned earlier, Mr. Salters mentioned this, our most precious resource is our people. It always has been and always will be. That includes our students, our families, our staff, and our community, because we still are one community in Lexington 1 and in the Gilbert area. So, of course, kids are going to get the traditional South Carolina curriculum standards in grades pre-K through 5, but our team will be coming together this summer, socially distanced, if that's what's required at that point. We have a leadership camp scheduled, and we also have a curriculum camp scheduled this summer in July. We'd love for you to come join us, where we'll be looking at the state standards and deeming those that are absolutely critical. Because not all standards were created equal. Some are great to know, but your life's not going to end if you don't have it next year. So we're looking at foundational standards. That's a lot of the work of Dr. Robert Marzano, and looking at what is absolutely most critical and translates across curriculum areas. And then we provide a guarantee that from grade to grade, we're guaranteeing that that kid is going to achieve across subjects and grade levels. We're going to have what other elementary schools have in terms of Spanish or foreign language, world language, PE, art, music, and computer science offerings. I'll go a little more in depth in that in a minute. And as we did this year, we'll continue the trend of having our daily morning meetings, which are integral for building community and bringing kids from 700 different home lives together in one communal space where they belong. Some really cool things that we have that we're really excited about that were part of the design. We have a reading recovery space. If you look on the bottom left picture, that's a two-way where reading recovery people are certified, and they use this as part of professional learning and certification. The top right, there are other spaces built into the building where we can have model classrooms and teaching areas to look between two classrooms. The top right actually is looking at one second grade classroom and another third grade classroom. And we're going to feature math, ELA, and Spanish immersion in these type settings so that we can learn from each other, and also others from universities, teacher education can learn as well. Of course, we're going to have Spanish immersion in grades K through 5, and we're pretty excited about that as well. Now, for the past several years at Gilbert Elementary, and this has been a huge hit, we're going to continue this at Centerville, is to offer kids once a week outside of related arts an extension where they can really explore areas that they traditionally would not have gotten. We've offered Lego 2.0, and that's not like the Legos that I played with when I was a kid. You're like doing engineering concepts and stuff. Little bit circuits where you're building things and putting things together and making things work. And all of these require those things that we talk about in our mission of being creative and collaborative and communicating. We also will offer coding, international studies, leadership and public speaking club, a ukulele choir, and that may change from year to year. We're going to have theater, cooking, graphic design, and videography. One of the things being a Title I school that we know is people throw around the term Title I synonymously with poverty. And when people think of poverty, they think of money. But the truth is, what I've experienced in my 25 years, oftentimes it's not the money or the home life, it's the lack of experiences. And we see it as our role to provide multitude of experiences so that we can narrow the achievement gap. Because it really sometimes is an achievement gap. It's exposure and experience. We're really, really excited about part of the hub of the school that you saw earlier. We have a design studio with computer science. Will be taught by Amber Bazard, and she is a former technology integration specialist from back in the day and has lots of experience. We're going to be, through our Title I project plan, we're going to be having augmented and virtual reality. And the cool thing about this is the virtual reality part allows you to consume a lot of content and take you to places that you ordinarily could not go. Through history, science, reading, literacy, numeracy, and other areas. Augmented reality helps us to create content. So we're not just consuming information, we're also creating information for other students, for visitors, for portfolios, etc. We'll have a makerspace present there, a 3D printing capabilities, and Macs that will be used for production there as well. This is something that we're pretty excited about, and we're thankful to Dr. Talley for sending Dr. Bissell and Ms. Bazard with early childhood to a conference looking at what are the best practices in early childhood. And so there's a lot of research about the learning environment, particularly around early childhood, because what we do with those kids sets them on the trajectory to be successful later. And so the research behind a sense of place, this is just part of a kindergarten classroom in the center area. We'll have the traditional or the package that all elementary schools will have for our standard kindergarten furniture, but in a corner you'll see items like this where it looks like home. And that's very intentional and authentically like home, because most of our students, many of them have not been in private or public pre-K programs. And we want to make them make the transition from home life to school life, which is more formal and lines and expectations. We want to blend that so that kids aren't afraid and their social emotional awareness is built. And a lot happens in these kind of places. In addition, in our early childhood areas, you might see some of your typical early childhood toys and dolls and things, but there are also going to be a lot of things like plain cardboard and markers and things that they can create. Instead of already having a small cash register and a little grocery checkout, they can create their own and be innovative and creative. We believe sometimes as educators, we set the limitations based on our past experiences, and so we want to open that up for our kids. This is kind of a rough photo, but the first 3 iterations in the district of the elementary prototype had the collaboration spaces on each hallway, which were large classrooms that are really great for collaboration, bringing groups of kids together. And what traditionally has happened is school size continues to increase. We need more classrooms, and so those areas have had to be used creatively. So Dr. Little and Mr. Salters and others had the fortitude and foresight to see that we're going to do this differently. And I think it's a phenomenal fix for some of those challenges. So on the K1 hallway wing, the 2-3 wing, and the 4-5 wing, in the middle of that wing, they've bumped out the hallway. I think at least 8 feet on each side of the hallway or something similar to that. Don't quote me on the 8 feet part. But there are collaboration stations. And what you see in the middle is a large presentation screen and then 2 whiteboards that can be accessed by ESOL, RTI, other small groups, classroom space. So every area of the school is literally a learning and teaching place. And so every space, it's not wasted. And it's a great asset for Centerville and the Gilbert community. You can't talk about elementary schools and not talk about playgrounds because it's a very important part of social interaction of kids. If you look on the left-hand side, you'll see part of our early childhood, our K4 and K5 playground. What you don't see here are the trike paths that kids are going to zoom on and the sand pit that actually has little diggers in it still because those are still relevant today. And on the right-hand side, you'll see the upper elementary playground. We already have partnerships with several local churches and organizations. We have great relations with and will continue with Gilbert Elementary School that will be next year, Gilbert Middle, and Gilbert High School. We have an amazing relationship with the arts programs there and the sports programs, them sending their students down and mentoring our kids, and that will continue. We also have had a lot of free work done by BlackRock Business Solutions, who actually created our designs and logos and have been really instrumental in our work. We also have a State Farm representative. We already talked to Columbia Metropolitan Airport. We had flight controllers, air traffic controllers out this spring as we were talking about this, and they're ready to get going to provide some experiences for our kids. We have someone in conversation with Bell Aviation currently, which is located right down the street. And then we have some, we haven't arrived there yet, but we have some restaurant shops and grocery who can serve either through a PTO venue or through directly with the school. That's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Heath, I didn't get to go to kindergarten. They didn't have it when I came through. Can I come back?
You absolutely can. You absolutely can. You
That's
can have
really-
a seat.
really
You can have a seat at the
exciting.
kitchen table.
That's really exciting.
I just want
the
to throw out
theme.
there, Mr. Brown, I think that the new logo and your mascot is perfect. I think in today's world especially, these mascots that we choose need to be sort of innocuous, you know what I mean? That in the past, we've done fierce animals, and things like that, and I think that this is the way to go. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have to express a little bit of concern that I feel like we're trending a little more towards that Carolina blue again. No, I'm just kidding.
I had
Well,
nothing to do with this blue.
I have to tell you that we looked at multiple models, and I
nothing
had
to
a
do
little
with this one.
difficulty with the orange. I call it rust. But at the end of the day, we looked at multiple models, and the leadership team, which is inclusive of our teacher leaders, support staff leaders, et cetera, all of which are actually going to Centerville, it really came down to consensus around this being a good color blend, and it's not used in the district currently, and to try to be
It's beautiful.
try to be unique and innovative and forward thinking.
And it's sky blue, not
Yes, sir.
Tar Heel
Yes.
blue.
That's right.
Yes,
Blue
the wild
sky.
blue yonder.
I think it's I think it's great having that aviation theme because if you look around the Gilbert community, there are several landing strips.
Yep.
There's a housing development.
Neighborhood, right?
Yes, a whole neighborhood has a landing strip. Of course, Mr. Bell.
Yep.
Aviation.
Yep.
So
The kids were really excited. I mean,
That's
they
great.
started, especially like 4th and 5th graders, they started coming up with all kinds of stuff. I'm like, whoa, slow down, we'll get there.
yeah, I want to come back to school.
Yep, awesome, we'll have you.
Well, thank
All right,
you
thank you.
so much. I know you said it's been a lot of work, and we can tell you've put a lot of work into it with you and your staff, so thank them for us, too. Okay. Dr. Little?
All right, so one of the things I just wanted for Dr. Talley to talk a little bit about tonight is, this is not necessarily part of our reentry plan per se, but there's some questions about what we're doing this summer for some of our academic work. And I just wanted to make sure everybody was clear about what our academic work was happening this summer, because we are taking a different approach. So we're going to take a primarily virtual approach to that academic work. And I just wanted Dr. Talley to walk through a little bit of that plan and why we're choosing to do an academic approach. I mean, a virtual approach to academic programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Little. I too just want to congratulate Mr. Branham on what a great job. I'm like Mr. Oswald. I want to become a Centerville aviator. It's very, very exciting. I appreciate the opportunity tonight to talk to the board about what we have planned for our 2020 summer academic programs. As Dr. Little mentioned, I'm sure you've read a lot in your national journals and in the local newspapers. Some school districts in South Carolina have chosen to go face-to-face for summer programming. Some districts have chosen to go virtual, and that would be us. And so I'm happy to talk to y'all about how we landed on that. I do want you to know that we are going to be offering a variety of learning opportunities this summer, and our team has been very strategic in who we've invited to participate in those opportunities. This year, we've invited 853 students. As I go through the presentation, you'll see what I mean about being strategic in our planning. We have really looked at the data in what we feel is the most needy subgroups. And those subgroups wouldn't surprise you. Those are our early learners, K1, 2, and 3. They're also our English language learners, and they're also students with disabilities. Just for your information, last year we served 290 students in our summer programs. With our virtual model this year, we're going to potentially serve over 600 students. As I said, we've invited 853. Those responses are continuing to come back in, and so we're very excited about that. Just some highlights of our programs. It's important that I tell you that we have deliberately designed these sessions to be personalized tutoring sessions. So students will be one-on-one with a teacher in sort of a tutoring model. And you might say, well, how can a 30-minute session be more relevant and meaningful than what we've done in the past? I know most of you have visited our summer reading camps in the summer, and you will note those were half a day, probably 3 hours, 3.5 hours in a day. Much of that time, however, was not direct instruction, and it certainly was not one-on-one. That model allowed us to take students outside, to do activities outside. Some of the activities that Mr. Branham mentioned is so important in learning. But we feel like in order to maintain safety for not only our students but our teachers, that a virtual delivery model was better for us. We have worked with instructional technology. You might have a concern about devices. Do all of our students have devices at home? And the fact of the matter is a handful of them did not, who are planning to attend the summer work. So we have worked with IT, and they have provided those devices for us. Also, we have been very strategic in targeting the curriculum. Mr. Branham mentioned that some standards are important to spend a lot of time with, some aren't as important. So we have really looked at our curriculum. We've identified steps and lessons that we need to focus on for every child. And obviously, we're going to do some heavy progress monitoring as we participate in this program. What's already been mentioned by Mr. Salters and Mr. Branham is in Lexington 1, we are blessed to have quality teachers. Every year when we have provided our summer reading camp, the same teachers come back. Now, that's important to keep that continuity. They just have fallen in love with our students. And so when I talked to my colleagues in the Midlands, they were struggling, frankly, getting teachers to teach in a face-to-face model. We had no problem when we presented our program and we worked with our principals and asked them to identify teachers who would want to teach in this program. They all stepped forward. So again, we're very, very blessed in our district. We've also provided training for our teachers on how to teach in a virtual model, and that's important because it's very different than teaching in a face-to-face model. So just here are a few highlights on the programs we are offering for elementary reading. Dr. Erica Bissell is our point person. We're calling this our Summer Reading Connections. These are, again, 30-minute sessions, and they'll provide literacy support. And it's important that you see who we've invited. This is what I meant by being strategic. This would have been our former summer reading camp for students who are struggling and are potentially not going to move from grade 3 in reading. So we are inviting 3rd and 4th grade students. Those are students who've received Tier 3 reading interventions during the school year, and they would have been on the watch list to be retained in 3rd grade. You'll notice the date. This will go from June 8th through July 30th. We're also providing support in the area of mathematics and ELA, and this is our K through 3 connections. This will take place in July, and Dr. Bissell and Dr. Gillespie and Hillary Morgan, our coordinator for mathematics, have collaborated on this work. This will be Monday through Thursday. 4 lessons will be offered, and we'll also cover phonics, reading strategies in ELA, number sense, and number fluency in mathematics. I did want to point out to you that Red Bank Elementary, they also are providing a virtual camp, and they provided this camp last year. They're calling it their summer reading camp program. Their Rising Readers Camp is what they call it. And they have about 35 students they'll be serving in that program. We have decided this year to shake up a bit, if you will, our traditional summer school. So Dr. Gillespie and Howard Bissell have collaborated on a program of opportunities for middle school reading and mathematics. We have invited 148 students to participate in this program from 7 of our middle schools. White Knoll Middle School last year started its own program very similar to this, and they'll be doing that again this year. We feel like this is less of a punitive approach. It's an intervention approach to we've targeted students who were in danger of failing reading or math, and they were also served through RTI throughout the year. So we feel like this program that will take place in June for 3 weeks will be very beneficial to any learning loss these students might have lost. Certainly, we are looking at our ESOL population. Again, Dr. Gillespie's been the point person for the Reading Connections program. This is a total of 58 students who are rising 3rd graders, English language learners. And this date for this is June 8th through July 30th. And again, this is one-on-one tutoring sessions for literacy and language development. And then we're offering something similar to grades K through 2. And then we have Alma Puente Ruiz is one of our social workers, and she's always worked in the summer, as you know. She's just a ever-ready bunny. She's amazing. I wish we could clone her. But she has a program for our newcomer English language learners, and this is for our K through 12 teachers will be working in that program, and we're very, very excited about that. We have a lot of new students coming to us in spite of COVID, and we need to take care of them before they come back in the fall. Another group I've mentioned is our students with disabilities. As you know, based on a student's IEP, we must offer them extended school year services. This year we have 60 students who are going to be participating in extended school year. 9 of our special ed teachers are teaching in that program. We have 3 speech therapists. None of our students required occupational therapy for extended school year, so we didn't have to offer that this year. Just incidentally, I will tell you, since COVID hit in March and we could not do face-to-face evaluations and reevaluations, we are a bit behind on that. We kept waiting for guidance from the state to give us guidance on how do we do face-to-face reevals with our students and our children. So we will start that work in July to work on incomplete evaluations and reevals. So we have about 300 of those to complete, but we have a plan for that. We feel pretty good about that. And so I think we're going to be on target for that. There are some additional supports that we're providing, and I won't go into much detail on this because I have provided you with a copy of these programs in great detail. You can read that at your leisure. But I am pleased, that last bullet, summer reading for all, we encourage every year all students to read one book over the summer, and then when they go back in the fall, the teachers utilize that, the book they've read to launch a community of readers and a community of learners. We also, this is just amazing, but we have given every child in K through 3 who received Tier 2 or 3 services, a set of 10 to 15 books to take home to add to their summer library. And so they picked those up the last day when they picked up all their materials. So many of our students don't have reading materials at home, so we utilize some of our funding for that. We also are going to utilize, the state is funding, has given us calendars for activities for parents to utilize over the summer for their children. We're certainly taking advantage of that. Those are digital lessons, and that is linked to every school's website. I hope that the board will ask me to come back in the fall to give you an update on how our programs went. I can't say enough about the good work and the hours and the thoughtfulness and the collaboration that's gone into what we are providing our students for the summer. And I'm just thankful that we live and work where we do, because I think our offerings are going to be pretty amazing. Happy to answer any questions.
I have a question. I know last year Dr. Bissell somehow acquired book bags for each student that participated in the summer program. And I think on the last day when we were there, Anne Marie, weren't they put their books, the 10 books, in their new book bags, and they were really excited. Is she able to acquire that this year? It sounds like a small thing, but it was a big deal.
I don't know that. I'll have to ask her.
Okay.
I will ask her. I know they did package those books in some way, but I don't know if they were in book bags.
Okay.
I will ask her. I think was that a donation, Ms.
Yes,
Smith?
it was a donation. I think it came from
maybe the
the
library.
United Way of the Midlands or something.
Could have been.
Something
I
like
will
that.
certainly ask her that.
Okay.
I know that in the past, this has been a extraordinary program, and it's been highly successful. I know that the first year the board went out and we looked at it, I literally cried I mean, those kids love this that much, and you could just see it
That's right.
everywhere you went in that building. And it's sad that we're at the situation that we are socially, that we can't do this like we normally do it, but I'll be anxious to see. I know that, like you and I were talking earlier, there's been no playbook, there's no game plan for the circumstances that we're in, so I'm really anxious to see what kind of successes we have in the fall.
Well, I appreciate that, and I have to say again, our staff has been very nimble. Dr. Little has said that to us since March. We have to be nimble, we have to be able to pivot, and our team has done that. And they're not, I'll tell you, they're not sad. They're excited about the number of children we're going to be able to reach in a strategic way. And we know when the children do come back and reenter, there are going to be gaps. And we know we're going to have to do a lot of progress monitoring. That's the first thing we're going to have to do. So we're working on a plan for that, but we do feel like this support is going to help us get where we need to be.
Good.
Dr. Talley, one last thing, just that summer reading for all, that all would include children with the last name Guyton, right? Guyton?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. It's
Sometimes
so-
we have some discussion at the Guyton household about why
Well,
it's important to read in the summer.
You
So I
tell
just,
those
I
Guyton
kind of wanted to
children-
get that
Wait a
out there
minute,
on the World Wide Web. Just,
My child's last name is not Guyton, and I had the same
yeah, it's
conversation.
weird. It's weird. Well,
Dr.
send it to the
Guyton, at
same
your
link.
house, does because I said so not work? I mean, it never worked at ours. I just wanted, you know.
It's weird. It's weird. I just want to thank you for clarifying
You're
that. I'll
certainly
make sure they
welcome,
know.
Well, Dr. Talley, and I want to say, I mean, this is amazing. Just, I mean, wow, what y'all have done and put together for this summer. And because it's all going to take place digitally, a lot of times our digital work is under the radar. And I would really encourage you to work with communications to toot our horn on this and, you know, promote, let folks that aren't receiving these services know what's being done this summer for all these students. I mean, even if it's just, you know, a little weekly update or something. I mean, just, you know, you don't want to reveal the students that are participating necessarily, but, you know, the title of the program and what its goal is, because I think this is an amazing catalog of high quality work for students that really deserve it.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
I'm very impressed.
Thank you, and we will, yeah, we've
Okay,
already started
figured it.
planning, right? But thank you.
I watched 2 very lengthy interviews with Molly Spearman, and in both interviews, she talked in depth about the children with the summer slide and the COVID slide, and she talked about how that was just one of her priorities because we have to bring those students along, and it's really unfair. They're going to be out of school for so many, you know, a classroom, a building for so many months. And I just want to say to Dr. Vissel and to you, and I mean, to all these ladies, Ms. Morgan, man, you have come up with a plan that I think it dovetails exactly with what Ms. Spearman was talking about, that we need to identify with these kids so that that slide is at least slowed down and stopped somewhat. So thank y'all.
Thank you.
I have a question, Dr. Talley.
Yes, ma'am.
And you may have covered this, I was taking notes. Do we know that all of these students will have access to Wi-Fi?
Yes, ma'am, we do. We
Okay.
have taken care of that. It's a
Okay.
great question, because that was our concern as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions, board? Okay. Dr. Little, is there anything else you want to add to your section?
No, ma'am, as you can tell, lots of hard work taking place. Very quick decision-making is what we're working on right now, short timelines, trying to make sure we have, to provide ourselves enough time to make these decisions, and then if we need resources and whatnot for the fall, we have time for those things to come in. And so there's a lot of work left to do here in June.
Yeah, well, it's obvious y'all have done a lot of work to make all this happen. Board, we're now to 10.0, which is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we go home.
Okay. I have the motion from Mr. Anderson. Do I have a second? Second from Ms. Green. All in favor, please stand up, and thank you, guys, and we'll see y'all in a couple of weeks.